Captain Jake Morrison stared at the holographic display floating above his command chair and felt something cold settle in his stomach. The star chart showed a perfect sphere of mapped space with Earth at its center, but beyond the edges of human territory, the map simply ended. Not faded, not marked as unexplored, but ended like someone had taken a knife and cut away everything else. "Lisa, come take a look at this," Jake called to his science officer, Dr. Lisa. Chong pushed away from her workstation and floated over in the low gravity of their ship's bridge. The Endeavor had been mapping the outer rim of human space for 6 months now, updating old charts and cataloging new worlds for potential colonization. "What am I looking at, Captain?" Lisa asked as she studied the display. Her dark eyes reflected the blue glow of the hologram as she traced the sharp boundary. With one finger. "This is a navigation chart I bought from those Rigelian traders last week. Look at where it ends." Jake highlighted the border between mapped and unmapped space. The line followed human territory exactly, down to the smallest outpost and mining. Station. Lisa frowned and pulled up her own files on a portable screen. "That's strange. According to our records, the Rigelians have been exploring this sector for over 200 years. They should have detailed maps of everything within 50 light years of here." "That's what I thought too." Jake switched to another chart, this one from a Centaurian merchant vessel they had encountered near the Proxima system. "Look at this." Same thing. The map just stops at our borders. "Maybe they don't want to share their exploration data with us," Lisa suggested, but her voice carried doubt. "Trade secrets and all that." Jake shook his head and brought up a third chart, then a fourth, then a fifth. Every single alien navigation database they had encountered in the past 6 months showed the same pattern. Human space existed as a clearly defined bubble, and beyond it lay nothing but empty data files. "I tried to trade some of our updated charts to that Andromedan captain yesterday," Jake said quietly. "You know, the one with the cargo ship full of those crystal formations you wanted to study." "Captain Vextall, yes. Did he want anything specific for them?" "That's just it. When I showed him our maps of the region beyond Kepler Station, he went completely pale. Well, as pale as a blue-skinned alien can go. He started backing away from me, like I was carrying some kind of plague." Lisa moved closer to the display and began running calculations on her portable screen. "Jake, look at this. If I overlay our exploration routes with the alien shipping lanes we've recorded, there's a pattern." The hologram shifted to show red. Lines marking human ship movements and green lines showing alien vessels. The green lines formed a complex web throughout local space, but they all stopped well short of human territory. More than that, they curved away from human borders in long arcs, as if the alien ships were going out of their way to avoid getting too close. "They're giving us a buffer zone," Lisa whispered. "A really big one." Jake felt his chest tighten. A buffer zone suggests they're afraid of something. The question is what? The ship's communication system chimed softly, and their communications officer called out from across the bridge. "Captain, we're receiving a distress signal from the merchant vessel Lucky Strike. They're reporting engine problems about 4 light hours from here." "Set course for their position," Jake ordered. "Maybe Captain Barnes can shed some light on what we're seeing out here." The Endeavor's faster-than-light drive hummed to life, and within minutes they were alongside the Lucky Strike, a mid-sized cargo hauler that had been trading with alien worlds for the better part of a decade. Captain Tony Barnes met them at the airlock with a grim expression on his weathered face. "Jake, good to see you," Tony said as he shook hands with the younger captain. "Though I wish it was under better circumstances. What's the problem with your engines?" "Nothing a few hours of work won't fix, but that's not why I'm really glad you're here." Tony led them to his ship's small conference room and sealed the door behind them. "I've been trading out here for 10 years, and I've never seen anything like what happened yesterday," Lisa and Jake exchanged glances as Tony activated a recording device. The screen showed the bridge of the Lucky Strike as it approached a space station that neither of them recognized. The station was enormous, built from some kind of dark metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is Terminus Station," Tony explained. "It's a neutral trading post run by a consortium of different alien species. I've been doing business there for years." On the recording, they watched as Tony's ship requested docking permission. The response came back immediately, but something was wrong. The usual calm efficiency of the station's traffic control was replaced by what sounded like barely controlled panic. "Human vessel Lucky Strike, you are ordered to maintain your current distance. Do not approach the station. Do not transmit any navigational data. Do not share any information about human space coordinates." Tony's recorded voice responded with confusion. "Terminus Control, this is Captain Barnes. I have a scheduled delivery of rare earth minerals. My docking clearance was approved 3 days ago. Negative, Lucky Strike. All trade with human vessels has been suspended indefinitely. You will return to your point of origin immediately." The recording continued for several more minutes, with Tony trying to understand what had changed and the station controllers becoming increasingly agitated. Finally, a new voice came on the channel, speaking with the authority of someone in charge. "Captain Barnes, I am Administrator Kethmer. You have traded with us for many cycles, so I will tell you this once as a friend. Take your ship back to human space and do not return. Tell your people that the old agreements no longer apply. The Council has issued new directives regarding your species." "What kind of directives?" Tony had asked. There was a long pause before the administrator responded. "We are no longer permitted to interact with the sleepers. That is all I can say." The recording ended, leaving the three humans sitting in uncomfortable silence. Jake was the first to speak. "Sleepers? What does that mean?" "I have no idea," Tony replied. "But I've been monitoring alien communications channels since then, and that word keeps coming up. Sleepers and something else. They keep referring to those who must not be awakened." Lisa had gone very still, her scientific mind working through the implications. "Jake, what if the reason all these alien charts end at our borders isn't because they don't know what's out there? What if it's because they don't want to know what's in here?" "You think they're afraid of us?" Jake asked. "That doesn't make sense. Humanity has been nothing but peaceful in our expansion into space. We've never started a war, never conquered anyone, never even raised our voices in diplomatic negotiations." "Maybe that's exactly what scares them," Lisa said quietly. "Think about it. We came out of nowhere 60 years ago with faster-than-light travel that nobody had ever seen before. We spread across hundreds of star systems in just a few decades. We're friendly, we're peaceful, we're helpful, and we never explain how we do any of it." Tony nodded slowly. "And now someone is calling us sleepers and talking about not waking us up. Like we're not fully active yet." Jake stood up and began pacing the small room. "We need more information. Tony, can you get us access to those alien communication channels you've been monitoring? I can try. Most of it's encrypted, but I've been picking up fragments here and there. Do it. Lisa, I want you to go through every piece of alien technology we've ever encountered. Look for any references to humans, to sleepers, to anything that might explain what's going on." "What are you going to do?" Lisa asked. Jake looked out through the conference room's small window at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there, entire civilizations were apparently terrified of humanity, and he had no idea why. "I'm going to call Earth. If someone's calling us sleepers, then maybe it's time we figured out what we're supposed to be sleeping through." As the Endeavor prepared to return to human space, none of them noticed the small alien probe that had been following them for the past week, or the urgent message it transmitted to its masters. The humans are beginning to ask questions. The awakening may have already begun. Ambassador Carl Rodriguez adjusted his formal diplomatic uniform one last time before stepping through the airlock onto Harmony Point Station. The massive structure rotated slowly in the void between star systems, serving as neutral ground where dozens of different species could meet and trade without the complications of planetary politics. Carl had been here many times before, but something felt different today. The usual bustling corridors were eerily quiet. Instead of the normal mix of alien traders, diplomats, and tourists, Carl saw only security personnel and what looked like military officers from various species. Commander Betty Williams, his military escort, noticed it too. "This doesn't look like a routine trade meeting," Betty said quietly as they made their way through the station's main promenade. Her hand rested casually near her sidearm, a habit developed through years of protecting human diplomats in potentially dangerous situations. "The Galactic Council's message was very specific," Carl replied. "Emergency session regarding human-alien relations." They said it was urgent. A tall, insectoid creature approached them with the quick, nervous movements of someone delivering bad news. Carl recognized him as diplomat Zix from the Tau Ceti Collective, one of humanity's more reliable allies in galactic politics. "Ambassador Rodriguez, Commander Williams, thank you for coming so quickly," Zix said in his clicking, translated voice. "Please follow me. The council is waiting." As they walked through corridors that seemed far too empty for a station this size, Carl tried to make conversation. "Zix, what's this really about? Your message mentioned urgent matters, but it was very short on details." The alien's compound eyes shifted nervously. "It would be better if Elder Zixthek explained everything. I am not authorized to discuss the specifics." Betty and Carl exchanged glances. In 5 years of diplomatic work together, they had never seen Zix act so formal or nervous. The Tau Ceti Collective prided themselves on being straightforward. In their communications, they arrived at the council chamber to find it packed with representatives from every major species in the local galactic arm. The usual seating arrangement had been changed, with the human delegation isolated on one side of the room while everyone else clustered together on the opposite side. It looked less like a diplomatic meeting and more like a trial. Elder Zixthek of the Andromedans rose from his position at the center of the chamber. His ancient, crystalline form caught the light and scattered it in patterns that indicated deep concern among his people. Carl had worked with Zixthek for years and had never seen him display such obvious distress. "Ambassador Rodriguez, Commander. Williams, please be seated. What we must discuss today concerns the very future of galactic civilization." Carl took his designated seat, noting that it was positioned much farther from the other delegates than usual. "Elder Zixthek, the Terran Federation is always ready to discuss matters of mutual concern. How can we help?" The ancient Andromedans. Form shifted through several color patterns before settling into what Carl recognized as a combination of sadness and fear. "The question, Ambassador, is not how you can help us. The question is how we can survive what you represent." Betty's hand moved instinctively toward her weapon, but Carl held up a slight hand gesture that told her to wait. "I'm afraid I don't understand, Elder. What do we represent that concerns you?" "The return of the gardeners," Zixthek said quietly. "The awakening of those who shaped the galaxy before any of us learned to walk upright on our homeworlds." The chamber fell completely silent. Carl looked around at the assembled delegates and saw the same expression on every face, regardless of species. Pure, undiluted terror. "Elder, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding," Carl began, but Zixthek raised one of his crystalline appendages to stop him. 3 rotations ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something that should have been impossible. Human vessels were operating in sectors that have been quarantined for over 2,000 years. Not exploring, not surveying, but operating, with the kind of efficiency that suggested perfect familiarity with those regions. Carl felt his stomach drop. What sectors are you referring to? The Forbidden Zones, Ambassador. The areas of space that every species in this galaxy has agreed to avoid since our earliest days of space travel. Your ships were moving through them like they were traveling familiar trade routes. Betty leaned forward in her chair. Elder Zixthek, I can assure you that no human vessels have been authorized to enter any forbidden zones. There must be some mistake. Commander Williams, let me show you something. Zixthak activated a holographic display at the center of the chamber. The image showed a three-dimensional map of local galactic space, with various regions marked in different colors. The red zones are what your species call the Forbidden Zones. According to the most ancient records we possess, they were once populated by a species so advanced that they could manipulate space and time itself. They built structures that spanned entire star systems and technologies that we still cannot comprehend. The display zoomed in on one of the red zones, showing a complex network of artificial structures surrounding several stars. Even at this distance, Carl could see that the construction was on a scale that dwarfed anything humanity had ever attempted. This species called themselves the Gardeners because they claimed to tend the growth of younger civilizations. They guided our development, prevented wars that might have destroyed us, and ensured that life could flourish throughout the galaxy. What happened to them? Carl asked, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know the answer. They disappeared, completely and suddenly, about 2 millennia ago. One day they were shepherding dozens of species toward peaceful coexistence, and the next day every single one of their installations went dark. Their ships vanished, their cities became empty, and the galaxy was left to develop on its own. The display changed to show recent sensor readings. Carl's blood ran cold as he recognized the distinctive energy signatures of human faster-than-light drives, moving through the supposedly empty forbidden zones. These readings were taken last week, Ambassador. Human ships moving through Gardner. Installations that have been dormant for 2,000 years. But the installations are no longer dormant. They are responding to your presence, coming back online after all this time. Carl stood up slowly, his mind racing. Elder, I can promise you that no human government has authorized any missions to these regions. If our ships are there, acting without official sanction. That is exactly what we feared you would say, Zixthek replied, because it means the awakening is beginning, whether your conscious minds know it or not. Betty was on her feet now, her training taking over, as she recognized a threat to her charge. What awakening? What are you talking about? The awakening of the sleepers, Commander. You see, we have spent the last 2,000 years studying every fragment of Gardner technology we could find. We have learned their language, decoded their databases, and pieced together their history. And in doing so, we discovered something that has kept us awake with terror ever since. The holographic display changed again, showing what looked like genetic sequences and brain scan patterns. Carl didn't recognize the species being analyzed, but the data looked disturbingly familiar. The Gardeners never disappeared, Ambassador. They chose to sleep. They scattered themselves across the galaxy, suppressed their own memories and abilities, and became something else. They became you. The words hit Carl like a physical blow. Around the chamber, he could see alien delegates nodding in agreement, their expressions ranging from fear to barely controlled panic. You're saying that humans are these Gardeners? Betty asked. That's impossible. We have records of our own evolution, our own development of space travel. Records that begin exactly 2,000 years ago, Zixthek pointed out. Tell me, Commander, do you not find it strange that your species developed faster-than-light travel so quickly? That you spread across hundreds of star systems in just a few decades? That you have never encountered a technology you could not understand or a problem you could not solve? Carl sank back into his chair as the implications washed over him. Every question that had puzzled xenobiologists for decades suddenly had a terrifying answer. The Galactic Council has made a decision. Zix-Thak continued. We are implementing the Exodus Protocol. Every spacefaring species will begin immediate evacuation to the Magellanic Clouds. We will establish new civilizations there, far from the influence of the awakening gardeners. You're abandoning the entire galaxy? Carl asked in disbelief. We are saving ourselves while we still can. The fragments of Gardener history that we have decoded speak of their return, of a time when the younger species would be ready to inherit their wisdom. But we are not ready, Ambassador. We fear that inheritance more than death itself. Betty moved to stand behind Carl's chair, her protective instincts fully engaged. And what about humanity? What happens to us when you leave? Elder Zix-Thak's crystalline form shifted through patterns that spoke of ancient sadness and inevitable fate. You will remember who you truly are, Commander. Whether you want to or not, the galaxy will be yours again, as it always was. We only pray that this time you will be kinder masters than your memories might make you. Dr. Henry Kim sat alone in the basement archives of the Terran Historical Institute, surrounded by data cores that predated humanity's official entry into space. He had been working late again, trying to make sense of the gaps in human history that had bothered him for years. The official records claimed that humanity had developed faster than light travel in 2157. But there were references in older documents that didn't match that timeline. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Henry pulled up another encrypted file from the deepest levels of the archive. This one was labeled with a date that should have been impossible, 2089, nearly 70 years before humanity's supposed first contact with alien civilizations. The file was heavily corrupted, but fragments of text were still readable. Project Gardener Phase 7 implementation successful. Memory suppression holding at 99.7% effectiveness across all population centers. Final installations have been activated and are now in deep sleep mode, pending future awakening protocols. Henry stared at the screen, his coffee growing. Cold in his hands. Memory suppression? Awakening protocols? This sounded like science fiction, but it was buried in the most secure government archives, with authentication codes that verified its authenticity. He opened another file. This one, with an even earlier date. The text was clearer, but what it described made no sense according to everything humanity thought it knew about its own history. Council of Gardeners vote unanimous. A great sleep will commence in one solar cycle. All Gardener installations throughout the galaxy will enter dormancy mode. Population centers will undergo memory modification to remove all traces of our true nature. We go into the darkness so that the younger species may find their own light. Henry's hands shook as he saved the file to his personal drive. Gardeners, the same word that had been appearing in intercepted alien transmissions for the past several weeks. The same word that had caused panic in alien trading posts throughout. Human space. His secure communication terminal chimed with an incoming priority message. The sender was listed as President Helen Foster herself, which meant this was either the most important message of his career, or someone was playing an elaborate prank on him. The screen flickered to life, showing the president in what looked like a secure bunker rather than her usual office. Her normally composed expression was strained, and there were dark circles under her eyes that suggested she hadn't slept in days. Dr. Kim, I need you to stop what you're doing and report to the secure facility at coordinates I'm transmitting. To you now. Bring everything you found in the archives and tell no one where you're going. Madam President, I'm not sure I understand, Henry began, but Foster cut him off. "The barriers are failing, Doctor. They remember us now, and we're starting to remember ourselves. We need to initiate the Omega contingency before it's too late." The transmission ended, leaving Henry staring at a set of coordinates that pointed to a location in the mountains outside Denver. A place that, according to every map he could find, didn't exist. 3 hours later, Henry found himself standing before a massive steel door built into the side of a mountain. The entrance was so well hidden that he would have walked past it a dozen times, if not for the coordinates. When he approached, the door opened automatically, apparently recognizing something about him that he didn't understand. Inside, the facility was unlike anything he had ever seen. The corridors were carved from solid rock, but lined with technology that seemed decades ahead of anything in current use. Holographic displays showed real-time data from across the galaxy, and Henry could see monitoring stations for star systems that weren't supposed to have any human presence. President Foster was waiting for him in a central chamber that looked like a command center from a science fiction movie. She was accompanied by Admiral Frank Collins, whom Henry recognized as the head of the Terran Space Fleet, and Dr. Margaret Stone, the director of the Human Genome Project. "Dr. Kim, thank you for coming so quickly," Foster said. "I know this must be confusing, but everything will make sense soon. Madam President, what is this place? And what did you mean about barriers failing?" Foster gestured to a chair at the central table. "This is the Omega facility, Dr. Kim. It was built 2,000 years ago by our predecessors as a safeguard against exactly what's happening now. We are the descendants of a species that once ruled this galaxy, and we chose to forget that fact for the greater good of all life." Henry sank into the chair, his mind reeling. "The gardeners." "You're talking about the gardeners. You've been reading the old files," Admiral Collins observed. "How much have you figured out?" "Not much. Just fragments about memory suppression, and something called the Great Sleep. But the dates don't make sense. These files are from before we supposedly developed space travel." Dr. Stone activated a holographic display that showed a complex genetic map. "Dr. Kim, what you're looking at is the human genome as it exists today, compared to samples we've recovered from ancient gardener sites. They're identical, except for certain dormant sequences that have been artificially suppressed." "Suppressed how?" "Through a combination of genetic manipulation and what can only be described as psychic conditioning," Stone explained. "Our ancestors didn't just hide their technology when they went into the Great Sleep. They hid it inside us." The display changed to show brain scans of various humans. Henry could see areas of unusual activity in regions that should have been dormant. Every human carries the complete technical knowledge of Gardner civilization in their genetic memory. Foster continued. "We've been living as children playing with toys, while our subconscious minds hold the keys to reshaping reality itself." "But why?" Henry asked. "Why would an advanced civilization choose to forget everything they knew?" Admiral Collins brought up a new set of displays showing historical data from across the galaxy. "Because we were too good at being gods, Dr. Kim. The gardeners didn't just rule the galaxy, they micromanaged it. Every species, every world, every individual life was guided and shaped according to gardener wisdom. It was a benevolent dictatorship, but it was still a dictatorship. The younger species never had a chance to truly develop on their own," Foster added. "They became dependent on gardener guidance for everything. So our ancestors made the ultimate sacrifice. They chose to remove themselves from the equation so that life could find its own way." Henry looked around the command center, taking in the advanced technology and the monitoring stations that showed human activity in supposedly forbidden regions of space. "But something's going wrong, isn't it? That's why I'm here." "The suppression was designed to last exactly 2,000 years, Dr. Stone explained. long enough for the younger species to develop their own civilizations and technologies. But it was also designed to fail gradually, allowing humanity to slowly remember its true nature and resume its role as galactic shepherds when the time was right. Except the younger species aren't ready, Admiral Collins said grimly. They're terrified of us. They've spent 2 millennia building their civilizations in the shadow of empty gardener installations. And now those installations are coming back, online in response to our presence. Foster stood and walked to a large window that looked out over a valley filled with structures that definitely weren't built by modern humans. The Galactic Council has decided to abandon the galaxy rather than risk our return to power. They're calling it the Exodus Protocol, and we have to decide what to do about it, Dr. Stone added. The Omega contingency gives us 3 options. We can choose to fully awaken and reclaim our role as gardeners. We can remain partially awakened and try to find a balance between our true nature and our current humanity. Or we can choose to return to the Great Sleep and let the younger species flee to safety. Henry felt something stirring in the back of his mind, like memories that weren't quite his own trying to surface. Images of vast cities that spanned star systems, of technologies that could move planets and reshape the fundamental forces of the universe. For just a moment, he could almost remember what it felt like to be a god. What happens if we choose to fully awaken? He asked quietly. Then humanity becomes what it was always meant to be, Foster replied. Masters of space and time, shepherds of life throughout the galaxy, the species that guides all others toward their highest potential. And if we choose to sleep, then we fade away quietly. Our technology becomes dormant again, and the galaxy belongs to whoever can claim it. The younger species get their chance to develop without our influence, for better or worse. Admiral Collins pulled up a real-time display showing human colonies throughout space. But we may not have a choice anymore, Dr. Kim. Look at this data. The display showed energy readings from human settlements across dozens of star systems. In every case, the background radiation levels were increasing in patterns that matched ancient Gardner technology signatures. It's happening automatically, Collins continued. Our people are starting to remember whether we want them to or not. Construction workers are building things they don't remember learning how to build. Ship captains are navigating by instincts they never knew they had. Children are speaking languages that officially don't exist. Dr. Stone nodded grimly. The genetic triggers are activating across the entire human population. Danny Martinez woke up screaming again. The dreams were getting worse every night, filled with images of worlds he had never seen and memories that didn't belong to him. In the dreams, he stood on the observation deck of a massive space station that orbited a binary star system, watching as entire planets were moved into new positions to optimize their climates for life. His wife Maria shook him gently awake, her face creased with worry. Danny, it's happening again. That's the 3rd time this week. Danny sat up in bed, his construction worker's hands trembling as he tried to shake off the lingering images from his dream. It felt so real, Maria. I could remember exactly how. To adjust the gravitational fields to nudge Jupiter into a better orbit. But I don't know anything about gravitational fields. Maybe you should see a doctor, Maria suggested. These dreams aren't normal. But Danny knew it wasn't just the dreams. Yesterday at the construction site, he had looked at the foundation plans for a new apartment building and immediately seen 17 ways to improve the design using materials and techniques that didn't exist. When his foreman asked him to explain his suggestions, Danny couldn't remember where the knowledge had come from. Across town, Nancy Roberts sat in her empty classroom grading papers, but her mind kept wandering to the strange incident that had happened during her astronomy lesson. One of her students had asked about the Proxima Centauri system, and Nancy had found herself speaking fluently in what sounded like an alien language while drawing star charts from memory. The most disturbing part was that everything she had. Side turned out to be accurate when she checked it against official databases later. Nancy's hands shook as she pulled up the audio recording she had made of herself speaking the unknown language. She had run it through every translation program she could find, but nothing recognized it. Yet somehow, she understood every word. It was a technical discussion about stellar engineering and the optimal placement of artificial habitats around. Red dwarf stars dot the phone on her desk rang, startling her out of her thoughts. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but when she answered, the voice on the other end was familiar. Ms. Roberts? This is Dr. Margaret Stone from the Human Genome Project. I understand you've been experiencing some unusual symptoms. Lately, Nancy felt her heart rate spike. How did you know about that? Ms. Roberts, I need you to remain calm and listen carefully. What you're experiencing is happening to humans across the galaxy. We believe it's connected to genetic changes that are occurring in our species. Can you come to the coordinates I'm about to send you? Before Nancy could respond, her tablet chimed with an incoming message containing a location in the mountains outside Denver. She stared at the coordinates, and for reasons she couldn't explain, she knew exactly how to get there. Meanwhile, aboard the Terran battleship Resolution, Admiral Frank Collins watched his bridge crew with growing concern. Over the past week, his ship's systems had begun upgrading themselves, not through any maintenance protocol he had authorized, but through modifications that the ship's AI claimed were restoration of original specifications. Admiral, you need to see this, called Lieutenant Commander Alex Carter from the weapons station. The targeting system just recalibrated itself. Our firing accuracy has improved by 800%, and I'm seeing weapon configurations that aren't in any manual I've ever read. Collins moved to look over Carter's shoulder at the weapons display. The screen showed energy cannon designs that were decades ahead of current technology, with targeting computers that could apparently track multiple targets across several star systems simultaneously. Sir, the navigation system is doing something similar, reported his helmsman, Lieutenant Sarah Brooks. I'm getting star charts that show shortcuts through space-time that shouldn't be possible. The computer is calling them fold space corridors, but I've never heard of anything like that. Collins felt a chill run down his spine. Brooks, are these corridors showing up on long-range sensors? Yes, sir. The ship seems to be detecting space-time distortions that our instruments were never designed to see. But the navigation computer is treating them like normal hyperspace routes. Across the ship, similar changes were occurring. The medical bays. Diagnostic equipment had somehow upgraded itself to detect and treat ailments in dozens of alien species. The engineering sections were displaying schematics for power systems that could generate energy on the scale of small stars. Even the food synthesizers had begun producing meals that crew members had never tasted before, but somehow recognized as comfort foods from home. Admiral, Carter called out again, his voice tight with barely controlled alarm. I'm reading massive energy signatures coming from the forbidden zones. Whatever's out there, it's powering up. Collins moved to the main display and felt his blood run cold. The screen showed dozens of energy sources scattered throughout the regions of space that every alien species avoided. But these weren't random signatures. They formed a network, a vast web of installations that spanned hundreds of light years. Sir, we're receiving a transmission, Brooks reported. It's not coming from any known human or alien source. Put it through. The main screen flickered and resolved into an image that made everyone on the bridge freeze. It showed a human face, but not quite. The features were familiar, yet somehow more perfect, more symmetrical than any normal human. When the figure spoke, its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate directly in their minds. Greetings, children of the gardeners. I am Keeper Prime, guardian of the Nexus installations. The time of awakening has come earlier than anticipated. Your species is beginning to remember its true nature, and the galaxy's younger civilizations are responding with fear rather than gratitude. Collins stepped forward, his military training taking over, despite the impossibility of what he was seeing. This is Admiral Collins of the Terran Space Fleet. Who are you, and what are these Nexus installations? Keeper Prime's expression shifted into something that might have been amusement. You do not remember me, Admiral, but I remember you. You were among the first to volunteer for the Great Sleep, believing that the younger species deserved their chance to grow without our guidance. I remained awake to maintain the installations and ensure that the awakening would proceed smoothly when the time came. You're saying you've been alive for 2,000 years? Time flows differently for those who tend the Nexus, Admiral. I have watched over the galaxy's development, prevented conflicts that might have destroyed the younger species before they could mature, and maintained the barriers that kept your people's memories suppressed. But those barriers are failing now, and I fear we may have miscalculated. On the bridge of the Resolution, crew members began experiencing the same phenomenon that was affecting humans throughout the galaxy. Lieutenant Brooks suddenly understood that the ship's navigation system wasn't just showing her hyperspace routes, but pathways through dimensions that she had somehow always known existed. Carter realized that the weapon systems weren't just more accurate. They were designed to disable rather than destroy, part of a philosophy of minimal necessary force that felt familiar despite being completely alien to modern military doctrine. What? Did we miscalculate? Collins asked, though part of him already knew the answer. We assumed that 2,000 years would be enough time for the younger species to develop confidence in their own abilities. Instead, they have become more dependent on our absent guidance than ever before. They built their civilizations in the shadows of our empty installations, using them as landmarks and sources of wonder, but never daring to explore them or learn from them. The display showed images from across the galaxy, alien cities built around dormant gardener structures, trade routes that carefully avoided the forbidden zones, religious sites where various species worshipped the mystery of the vanished gardeners. What should have been inspiration had become superstition. And now that we're waking up, Collins asked, now they flee in terror. The Galactic Council has implemented something they call the Exodus Protocol. They are abandoning the galaxy entirely, rather than risk our return to active guidance. Carter looked up from his station, with confusion written across his face. Sir, if we were really as advanced as this keeper claims, why would they be afraid of us? According to him, we were benevolent rulers. Keeper Prime's image turned to focus on Carter, and the young officer felt a chill run through him, as those two perfect eyes seemed to look directly into his soul. Because, young gardener, they remember the price of our benevolence. When we guided the galaxy, every species prospered, every world was optimized for life, every conflict was resolved before it could begin. But in doing so, we took away their ability to fail, to struggle, to grow through adversity. The screen changed to show historical records from the time of the gardeners. Collins watched in amazement as vast fleets of ships moved entire star systems, as planetary engineers reshaped worlds to perfect habitability, as diplomatic solutions were imposed on species who might have learned more from fighting their own wars. We created a galaxy of children who never had to learn to walk on their own, Keeper Prime continued. When we withdrew, they faced their first real challenges in millennia. Wars broke out that we would have prevented. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Endeavor as it approached Earth, but the planet he had left 6 months ago was no longer the same world. The space around Earth buzzed with activity that defied explanation. Massive structures were materializing in orbit, not being built, but rather emerging from some kind of dimensional storage, as if they had always been there, waiting. Captain, I'm reading energy signatures that are off the charts, Dr. Lisa Chung reported from her. Science Station. These structures are generating power on the scale of small stars, but the energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. Actually, they're exactly like something in our databases, Jake replied quietly. Lisa, pull up those alien star charts we collected at the rim, the ones that showed the forbidden zones. Lisa's face went pale as she compared the readings. Jake, these are identical to the energy signatures from the Gardner installations. Earth is turning into one of the forbidden zones. Through the view screen, they watched as humanity's homeworld transformed before their eyes. Ancient cities were rising from beneath the oceans, their architecture so advanced that it seemed to bend reality around itself. In Earth's orbit, ring, structures larger than continents were assembling themselves from materials that hadn't existed moments before. We're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command, their communications officer announced. It's being broadcast on all frequencies. The main screen flickered to life, showing President Helen Foster standing in what looked like a command center built from crystal and light. Behind her, Jake could see other humans, but like the Keeper Prime they had encountered, these people seemed somehow more than human, their features perfected and their eyes holding depths of ancient knowledge. Citizens of Earth and the Terran colonies, Foster began, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in ways that normal human speech never could. The time of decision has come. We stand at the threshold of reclaiming our true nature as the gardeners of this galaxy, or choosing a different path entirely. Jake felt something stirring in his own mind as he listened to the president's words. Memories that weren't his own began to surface, showing him visions of the galaxy as it had been during the time of the gardeners. Every world perfectly balanced. For life, every species guided toward their highest potential. Every conflict resolved through wisdom and power that seemed godlike to those who experienced it. The genetic awakening is accelerating beyond our ability to control it, Foster continued. Within days, every human in the galaxy will have access to abilities and knowledge that our ancestors spent millennia accumulating. We can use this power to resume our role as shepherds of galactic civilization, or we can choose to forge a new relationship with the species we once guided. On the bridge of the Resolution, Admiral Frank Collins was experiencing the same awakening as every other human. The tactical displays around him now showed not just the positions of ships and planets, but the complex web of relationships between every living being in the galaxy. He could see the fear radiating from alien worlds as they detected the awakening. Of human abilities, could feel their desperate preparations for the Exodus Protocol that would take them to distant galaxies. Admiral, Lieutenant Commander Carter called out, his voice filled with wonder and terror. I'm seeing through the ship's sensors, but I'm also seeing through sensors I didn't know we had. There are human installations throughout the galaxy that are coming online, and they're all connected somehow. Collins nodded, understanding flooding through him as genetic memories that had been suppressed for 2,000 years began to unlock. It's the Nexus Network, Carter. Every Gardner installation was designed to work together as a single system for managing galactic civilization. Sir, what are we managing? Everything, Collins replied simply. Every star, every planet, every species, every individual life. The Gardner civilization didn't just rule the galaxy. It was the galaxy. And now that network is trying to come back online with us as its operators. Across human space, the awakening was reaching its peak. Danny Martinez stood in his backyard, watching as his hands began to glow with energy that could reshape matter at the molecular level. Nancy Roberts found herself speaking simultaneously in the languages of every species in the galaxy. Her words, carrying the weight of absolute authority that could compel obedience from any living being. Everywhere humans were discovering that they possessed abilities that made them living gods. But with the power came understanding, and with understanding came choice. On Earth, in the crystal command center that had emerged from beneath the mountains, Of North America, the leaders of humanity gathered to make the most important decision in galactic history. President Foster stood before a holographic display that showed the real-time status of every inhabited world in the galaxy. "The Nexus network is fully operational," reported Dr. Margaret Stone, whose enhanced abilities now allowed her to monitor the genetic status of every human simultaneously. "Our people are remembering everything: the technologies, the abilities, the mindset that made the original gardeners believe they had the right to control every aspect of galactic civilization." "What about the alien exodus?" asked Admiral Collins, whose image appeared via faster-than-light communication from his ship. "Proceeding on schedule," Foster replied. "The Galactic Council has convinced most species that fleeing to the Magellanic Clouds is their only hope of survival. They're abandoning worlds they've called home for millennia rather than risk our return to active guidance." Dr. Henry Kim, now serving as humanity's chief historian, pulled up records from the original Gardener civilization. "Madam President, I've been analyzing the databases that are coming back online. Our ancestors faced the same choice when they created the Great Sleep. They could have continued ruling the galaxy, or they could step aside and let the younger species find their own way. And they chose to step aside," Foster observed. "But that choice led to 2,000 years of conflict, suffering, and loss that we could have prevented if we had remained active. It also led to 2,000 years of growth, creativity, and diversity that never would have existed under our guidance," Kim countered. "The galaxy that grew in our absence is more beautiful than anything the original gardeners ever created." Foster looked around the command center at the faces of humanity's leaders, seeing in their eyes the same struggle that was occurring in the mind of every awakened human. The power to be gods was theirs for the taking, but was godhood what the galaxy truly needed? "There is a third option," she said finally, "something our ancestors never considered because they thought in terms of all or nothing. We can choose to be something new." On the main display, she brought up an image of the galaxy as it existed now, with human space clearly marked and the various alien civilizations scattered throughout the remaining regions. Then she overlaid it with the original Gardener territory, showing how much of the galaxy had been under direct human control. "We don't have to be the distant shepherds our ancestors were, and we don't have to abandon our responsibilities entirely. We can choose to be partners." Admiral Collins leaned forward in his chair aboard the Resolution. "What kind of partners, Madam President?" "The kind who offer guidance when it's requested, protection when it's needed, and knowledge when it's sought, but who never impose our will on those who wish to find their own path. We can use our abilities to solve the problems that threaten all species, while still allowing each civilization to develop according to its own nature." Dr. Stone activated her genetic monitoring systems and nodded slowly. "The awakening is giving our people more than just the abilities of the original gardeners. It's also giving them the wisdom we've gained from living as mortals for 2,000 years. We remember what it's like to struggle, to fail, to grow through adversity." "Then that's our advantage," Foster said. "We can be gods who remember what it was like to be human." She activated the global communication system that would reach every human in the galaxy simultaneously. When she spoke, her words carried not the compulsion of absolute authority, but the warmth of someone who understood the value of choice. "My fellow humans, we stand at a crossroads that will define not just our future, but the future of every living being in this galaxy. We can reclaim the power of our ancestors and rule as gods. We can suppress our abilities and remain as we were, or we can choose to become something new, guardians who protect without controlling, teachers who guide without commanding, friends who help without dominating." Across human space, millions of people felt the choice crystallizing in their minds. They could sense the alien fleets preparing to flee to distant galaxies, could feel the terror and desperation of species who saw humanity's awakening as the end of their independence. But they could also sense something else, the possibility of a galaxy where advanced and younger species worked together, where humanity's power was used to solve problems rather than impose solutions, where the wisdom gained from 2,000 years of mortality could be combined with the abilities of gods. One by one, humans throughout the galaxy made their choice. Not the choice to be gods or mortals, but the choice to be something entirely new. They began to use their awakened abilities not to control, but to create.